With a mind map on GIT motility, we'll try and brainstorm and remember everything that we know, specifically the motility, the gastrointestinal tract, organization of the GIT wall, smooth muscle characteristics, and as you can see over there, the patterns of motility in the GIT, control of motility, neural and hormonal pathways, the esophagus, stomach, small intestines, and colon. So with this first part, still on the motility of the GIT, proportion and mixing of the contents of the gastrointestinal tract is very crucial to digestion and absorption. And there is movement of the GIT content over long distances. So from the pharynx to the stomach is around 65 centimeters, though there are some variations. And that of the duodenum is 25 cm, jejunum and ileum that's around 260 centimeters, and the colon 110 centimeters. The mechanisms of movement, we have the intrinsic properties of the gut muscle and the reflexes involving the neurons intrinsic to the gut, and reflexes involving the central nervous system, paracrine, effects of chemical messengers, and gastrointestinal hormones, and also the sphincters. So when it comes to the organization of the gastrointestinal wall, you have the mucosa, the submucosa, muscularis, and the serosa. So the intestinal wall, so you have your mucosa, and the right between the mucosa and the submucosa, you have your muscularis mucosa, and from your submucosa to the muscularis area or muscular area, you have your Meissner plexus, or the submucosal plexus of Meissner, and from there your muscular layer, or the muscularis, that's where you have your circular layer, the longitudinal layers. But right in between the circular, the inner circular and the outer longitudinal layers, you have your myenteric plexus of Orbach, or the Orbach plexus, you have it over there, and the serosa, that's where you have your visceral peritoneum. And with the smooth muscle characteristics, there are the location of the muscle, the cell characteristics, and the control action helps you differentiate the smooth muscle from the other types of muscles, being the cardiac muscles or the skeletal muscles. And with the smooth muscles, the wall of the holy organs, like vessels, respiratory passage ways, you have your smooth muscles over there. With cardiac muscls, the walls of the heart, the skeletal muscles, which is attached to bones. With the cell characteristics, for the smooth muscles, it's tipped at each end with branching networks and also non-striated. With the cardiac muscles, there's branching networks, special membranes, intercalated discs. Also between cells, they are single nuclei, slightly striated. And with the skeletal muscles, they are long, cylindrical, multinucleated, heavy striated muscles. And with a control action, smooth muscle is involuntary. It produces peristaltic, peristalsis, or contracts and relaxes slowly and maintain sustained contraction. Cardiac muscle too is also involuntary, pumps blood out of the heart, self-excitatory, but influenced by the nervous system and hormones. But when it comes to the skeletal muscles, it's voluntary, produces movement at the joints, stimulated by the nervous system, contracts and relaxes rapidly. With the characteristics of the smooth muscles, like I said, anatomically, it's distinguishable from the skeletal muscle and cardiac muscles by the lack of visible cross striations because actin and myosin fibers are not arranged in regular arrays, and there are no Z lines. Dense bodies in the cytoplasm and attached to cell membrane are bound by the alpha actinin to actin filament. Tropomyosin presents with the smooth muscles, or they are present with the smooth muscles, but troponin is absent over here, and the isoform of actin and myosin are different from that of the skeletal muscles. The sarcoplasmic reticulum is also present, but less extensive. We have few mitochondria, and it depends more on the glycolysis for their metabolic needs. Where the types of smooth muscles, we have the unitary or the visceral smooth muscles and the multi-unit smooth muscles. The visceral smooth muscles or unitary smooth muscles, the large sheets, but the multi-unit ones are individual units. And when it comes still on the visceral, the unitary smooth muscles, there are many low resistance gap junctions, whilst the multi-unit, there are few or no gap junctions. The visceral smooth muscles, they are syncytial, and the multi-units are non-syncytial. The viscera are found primarily in the walls of the hollow viscera, whilst the multi-units are found in structures in which the fine involuntary contractions occur. And with the viscera, you can find them in the uterus, intestines, ureters. The multi-units, you can find them in the iris of the eyes. And with the still on the unitary or the visceral, and that's of the multi-units, both blood vessels, they have both pipes in their walls, and both pipes respond to hormones and other substances at certain times too. When it comes to the electrical and mechanical activity of the visceral smooth muscles or the unitary smooth muscles, there is unstable membrane potential. There's no true resting value, but relatively lower than when active and higher when inhibited. And there is continuous irregular contractions that are independent of nerve supply, as tonus. But the pattern of motility, there are general patterns of motility, first being peristalsis, segmentation and mixing, basic electrical activity and regulation of motility, migrating motor complex mass movement. So those are the patterns of the 5 patterns. There are more, but the major 5 patterns of motility: peristalsis, segmentation and mixing, basic electrical activity and regulation of motility, the migrating motor complex, and also mass movement. Peristalsis occurs in the GIT from the esophagus to the rectum, and is initiated by stretching of the gut by contents of the lumen. And it involves both contraction and relaxation. So contraction is done, it's done or happens behind the stimulus, and segmentation of or segment of relaxation is occurs usually in front of it. And the wave of contraction moves content arboreally or caudally, or in the caudal direction at 2 to 25 centimeters per second, and can be increased or decreased by autonomic input to the gut. And when it comes to peristalsis, we have the primary peristalsis and the secondary peristalsis. Primary peristalsis is initiated by swallowing, and the secondary is elicited by distension of the esophagus. And esophageal contractions after swallowing are regulated by the medullary swallowing center, or the intramural esophageal plexuses, the vagus nerve, and other intrinsic biogenic processes. When you talk about segmentation, it's for mixing of intestinal contents with um, digestive juices. We have the retrograde and the anterograde movement to mix chyme. So it gives chyme or chyme time for digestion and absorption, and is controlled by the enteric nervous system. And the central input can modulate it. With the basic electrical activity and regulation of motility, the um, basic electrical rhythm is something that we measure. Yeah, so basic electrical rhythm of the GIT, except in the esophagus and proximal stomach of the smooth intestines of the GIT, which has spontaneous rhythmic fluctuations in the membrane potential between negative 65 and negative 45 MV. So the basal or the basic electrical rhythm is initiated by the interstitial cells of Kajal or Kajal. So it's about 4 per minute in stomach, 12 per minute in the duodenum, and 2 per minute in the cecum. And the function of the basic electrical rhythm is to coordinate peristaltic and other motor activity. And the contractions can occur only during depolarization or depolarizing part of the waves. So when you get a diagram or a result of a basic electrical rhythm of GIT smooth muscle, you realize that the electrical recording, let's take the mechanical recording, it's a bit different from that of the electrical recording, and within some few seconds you realize acetylcholine, it's being implicated over here, and epinephrine at the later stages too. So the morphology and the relation to the muscle contraction are very relative. Stimulatory effect of acetylcholine and inhibitory effect of epinephrine are depicted in the basic electrical rhythm of the GIT smooth muscle graph or diagrams. Alright, so initially from the stimulation, you could see it in the graph and by the acetylcholine and later on epinephrine. So migrating motor complex occurs during fasting, and it's a modification of GIT smooth muscle activity. It's more of the housekeeper of the gut, and the cycles of activity from the stomach continue all the way to the distal ileum, and each cycle has three phases. So the first phase is the quiescent period, the second phase is irregular electrical and mechanical activity, and the third phase is regular activity. And remember motility. So when you talk about the phases, at the phase 1 there's no spike potentials, and phase 2 there's irregular spike potentials and contractions, and when it comes to phase 3 there's regular spike potentials and contractions. So let's take from the stomach all the way to the distal ileum with propagations about 5 cm per minute. The phases could be seen, but when there is a meal it stops, but after the meal and digestion it continues, and with each of them having phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, like I talked about. Okay, so the complexes move down the GIT at a regular rate during fasting, and they are completely inhibited by a meal, and they resume about 90 to 120 minutes after a meal. Alright, so now we could infer from this that the esophagus is at rest. The pressures over there are almost zero, but the moment they're swallowing, there it continues. There's an increase in it. So let's take the passage of an NG tube through the nasal pharynx through the oropharynx through the stomach. Realize at the pharynx oropharynx, the pressures will be 0 millimeters mercury, but the moment the tube enters, is being swallowed and it enters the esophagus and the glottis is being closed up, there is a spike in the pressures and it goes back down again. And then as it goes down through the upper esophageal sphincter, through the esophagus to the lower esophageal sphincter, there's a spike in the pressure, and then actually there'll be negative pressures when it gets to the lower esophageal sphincter before it goes up. Alright, so when it comes to segmentation and peristalsis, and you realize the contractions happen at the middle, it happens in that circular fashion, whilst the peristaltic wave, there is contraction between and before the bolus or behind the bolus, and there's relaxation after the bolus, and there's distension or dilatation as it moves on. The ileocecal valve, that's when you have the highest peristaltic movement. Right, so when it comes to mass movement or mass action contraction, realize the difference between that and the segmentation is I have all these circular contractions happening all throughout the large intestines, but with the mass movement there's segmentation at the initial part. But let's take like the transverse colon, there isn't the segmentation but mass, just like the name, a whole lot of bolus or time or food moved into the other part of the large intestines. Alright, so when it comes to the molecular basis of smooth muscle contraction, the one calcium plays a prominent role in the initiation of the contraction of the smooth muscle, just like the skeletal and cardiac muscle. Depolarization occurs, so it's depolarized by influx of calcium. There's repolarization stage, that's by the efflux of potassium. And with the unitary or the visceral smooth muscle, it contracts when it's stressed, and the stretch is followed by a decline in the membrane potential and an increase in the frequency of spikes and a general increase in tone. Alright, so that's it for the part 1 of GIT motility. We continue with the part 2 mind maps later.